Hello, everyone, and welcome to our next session of CME Palooza. I'm going to bring up the slides here. This is our 11 a.m. Eastern Time session, Grant Review MythBusters, session sponsored by Forefront Collaborative. Thank them for their support. And our moderator is the esteemed Ted Singer, who is the president of PeerView Institute. Before we get started, just some housekeeping details. Yes, I'm going to read through all of these each time. Gold sponsor is Genentech and Prova Education. Our silver sponsors are ASIM and Forefront Collaborative, Global Academy for Medical Education, Integrity Continuing Education, and PCE. Our bronze sponsors are, we had to go into a second slide for sponsors this year, which is nice because now I can actually read them before it got too small. ACHL, Clinical Care Options, CMEology, Global Education Group, Helio Education Lab, Highmark CE, Impact Education, Infograph Ed, and Connective, PCN, PVI, ArmyI, and Thistle Editorial.
That's great.
There are 3 ways that you can ask questions. You can use the CME Palooza text line to send in your question, 267-6660-CME. You can click on the Google Slides link, which is found on the live page. It is right above the video, so you can just click on it there. And I'm Derek, so click on the one for Derek, not on the one for Scott. And you can also tweet your questions using the CME Palooza hashtag. And so I'll be monitoring all 3 of those different ways to ask questions, and then we'll go from there. Speaker disclosure. All opinions, discussions, and/or conclusions expressed are our own, and they don't represent an endorsement or position from our employer or parent company or affiliates. I'm going to turn things over to Ted now. I will say we're having some technical difficulties with one of our panelists, Julia, who she was on, and then we lost her about 2 minutes beforehand. So I'm going to turn things over to you, Ted, and I'm going to try and see if I can get Julia to hop on. So you may see her suddenly appear before all of you, but I'll turn it over to you, Ted. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, Derek. Well, thank you to Derek. Thank you to Scott. Everyone loves CME Palooza. We're so happy to have been invited to participate. And our session today is CME MythBusters, and I am joined by an esteemed panel of commercial supporters who will introduce themselves. First, from the Indianapolis office, Beth Page. Beth?
Hi, Beth. Hi, Ted. This is Beth Page from Indianapolis. I work at Eli Lilly and Company, and I am a medical grant consultant for continuing medical education and have been with the company for 23 years.
Excellent. Well, thank you for being here today. And straight out of the Plainsboro, New Jersey office, Dale.
Thanks, Ted. My name is Dale Coomerly, and I work for Bristol Myers Squibb. We do now reside in Lawrenceville, so we've moved away from our Plainsboro site, surprisingly. Brand new buildings, open office, so still getting used to that. I've been here for 20 years. I've am leading the medical education department here now for the last couple of years.
Gotcha. And we know those open office plans can be hard to find a quiet place to do a call like this, correct?
Yep. So I'm in a nice little conference room here.
All right, very good. And we, as Derek intimated, we have a third panelist, Julia Shlovskaya from Takeda. We're going to try to, from the Chicago office, we're going to try to get her up and running. I am Ted Singer from PVI, PeerView Institute for Medical Education, coming to you from Mount Kisco, New York, which is not a corporate office, but I think you can probably tell looking over my shoulders. It is part of my domicile, and I have tried to secure the perimeter so that we're not interrupted by man nor beast, but I make no guarantees to that end. So anyway, here we are. So CME MythBusters, the idea today is that our panel of supporters has been brave enough to answer questions about, oh, we might be getting Julia back. I just see her icon popping up. Let's see.
Julia, can you hear us?
I can hear you, but I don't think you can see me.
You know what? That's fine. We got your voice. That's as much as we need for right now.
Perfect.
No,
Okay,
that's
great.
good. And Julia, it's perfect timing. I just want to, I mentioned your name, but I will pass it to you right now just to introduce yourself.
Sure, thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Julia. I'm a Senior Manager of Medical Education and External Affairs at Takeda Pharmaceuticals.
Excellent. Okay, well, I was just getting into the sort of the theme and design of this session. You know, the idea is that I think among the provider community, of which I am a member, there are a lot of myths about the grant review process that some may be true, some may not be true. But, you know, whenever that, you know, what the supporter panel may not know is that when that sad decline of a grant comes through on our email, it's a very trying time for us in the provider community. You know, and we all, and this is a secret. This is a secret I'm letting out right now. You know, we all sort of put on our Oculus Rift goggles and we meet in these virtual spaces where we can commiserate with each other. And boy, you know, the range of reasons why we come up with why we think our grant was rejected, you know, range. You know, it starts with they just don't like us, you know, but then there's just a laundry list of other things that come up, and I've noted some of these. And you know, to tell you the truth, what I've actually done is crowdsourced some from the provider community, some myths about the grant review process that we're hoping our panel can address. I reached out on email, I used LinkedIn, and then extremely rare these days in 2017, I actually talked to people face to face. Imagine that. You know, was at the CBI meeting, was at the Quality Improvement Symposia, saw a lot of you out there and said I was having this session and posed questions. And we were able to gather, you know, 27 different myths that I shared with the panel. But the way we're going to do it today is I'm going to call on them one by one. They're going to pick a number, 1 to 27. And I will ask that question, and then we'll have a little bit of back and forth about it. As Derek showed in the slide that's up, you can submit questions if you're listening now. It's a very good opportunity to, you know, in a rare setting to have this kind of access. So I encourage everyone to do that. So starting left to right on my screen, Beth is on the left. So Beth, I will give it to you to pick the first number.
Okay. How about, let's say, number 20.
20, okay. So here is the myth. Maybe myth, maybe not. The desire for multi-support has less to do with compliance and more to do with wanting to stretch dollars further.
Okay. It's probably a combination of both. It is, well, at least I have the diabetes area, so there's multiple different companies that could help support programs. So we'd like to see multi-support so that the program does not have the perception of bias. And also, too, because there are different opportunities for other people to support the programs, we do feel that we should not be the only ones supporting it and that other people could provide support.
No, that's great. Now, Dale, just to sort of a little follow up to you, you know, another related sort of question I've heard is that sometimes a committee will look at the, say, the learning objectives of the agenda and say, well, only a percentage of this really aligns with the science that we're involved with or our areas of interest. So we don't see providing full support for this makes sense. So do you have a response to that or an agreement or disagreement with what Beth said?
No, I mean, I agree with what Beth said. I mean, that's very much what we do here. With regards to, you know, to the question that you asked, when it comes down to looking at what the learning objectives are, what the agenda says and stuff like this, we have to consider, of course, the multi-support nature of it. If it is multi-support, then it's likely that a lower approval amount will still allow the activity to occur. If it's a situation where it's a single support and it doesn't fully align with what we're looking, strategically with us, then we have to make a decision: is if we have money and want to support it, will the activity still continue if we only provide partial support? That's the key bit, right? And so we will reach out to providers in that situation and try to see if we can make an assessment of, do they have it, with other companies or not.
No, I got you. So that is something you'll communicate around, which I think is pretty helpful. Over to you, Julia. You can either respond to that or pick a new number, and we'll move in a different direction.
Let's pick number 3.
Number 3, okay. Number 3. A provider's grant will get more attention as an unsolicited submission rather than a response to an RFP, since an RFP generates so many responses.
I would say that's a myth. And it really depends on the strategy of each company. From Takeda's perspective, we are moving in the direction where we want to be more focused and strategic and have more call for grant applications out rather than unsolicited requests. But we realize there are benefits to both. So does that answer your question, or would you like me to elaborate any further?
No, I think that's pretty good. What I might say to to either Beth or Dale to respond to is the idea that it does seem from sitting where I sit and looking across the entire commercial support landscape, RFPs have become more popular, and so I think that you probably get a lot of responses because it's an indication that there is funding around topic X. I guess with Julia indicated that she's looking at more trying to do more call for grant applications or RFPs. Is that a trend that you guys see? And Dale, I'll call on you first.
Yeah, so it is for us. It's definitely a trend that we look to do more of the RFP, we call it request for education. But we do look to do those more. If an unsolicited grant comes in and it happens to align with one of the current RFEs that we have posted, then we'll just actually put that into the queue and consider it along with the RFE that's posted. So that's one thing that we'll do. If it's outside of the RFP process that we get this unsolicited grant, and of course it's a grant with a larger dollar amount to it, more times than not we don't have the funding for that, and so we would not be able to support it at that time.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, Dale, is now your turn. We did get a question in from the audience. Are you brave enough to tackle this one? Oh, well, sorry, Beth, go ahead.
I just wanted to make a comment about that. Different companies handle RFPs in different ways. I know that we kind of use the RFP process as an ad-needed type of way that we can get some kind of grant applications come in that we're not seeing from the unsolicited grants that come in. We mainly process unsolicited grants and use that as a limited basis.
Yeah, that's
so and I think that's a key point too. And we also, like I think Julia mentioned, do take unsolicited grants 24/7, and we do provide funding for a lot of those grants. But those are typically more of the the grand round, smaller local regional conferences and stuff that are requesting funding from us, maybe smaller hospitals or something like that. We try to really provide a strategy to our team because we do have limited budgets. We're not seeing some of the stuff come in that we're interested in funding.
Gotcha. Okay, so Dale, it's your turn. Now we've got a question that came in that sort of relates to something I've got on the list here, and so
All right.
you're willing to wade into these uncharted waters. Okay, so the question that I'll sort of read the one that we have on our list, and then I'll read the related one that came in from a participant, which is with all the talk about higher level outcomes, the metric that most satisfies decision makers within commercial supporters is large numbers of attendees and participants. And the related question that just came in was, as a provider in a rural, underserved area, we rarely receive funding. Our perception is that we're unable to reach huge numbers, therefore we are rejected.
Well, very interesting point. So participation is the very basic level, and of course, we're providing education, and education is, if you go to 2 people, it's very different than if you're going to 2,000 people. I think one of the things that we look at here at BMS is the cost per learner, and we try to make assessments with regards to one of the things that we ask for, if I back up a little bit, is what's the estimated audience that is expected to attend a program. We will, basically can do a cost per analysis. So if you're expecting 2,000 and you're asking for 2,000, then we can easily calculate how much that is. We don't, particularly look for, activities if it's greater than a certain number of participants. Really for us, it's more around what is the education, what is the educational need that's being addressed, and how is the program itself going to accomplish that. We do look a lot of times for higher level outcomes, a minimum really of level 3 times level 4 is what we're really looking for, because when it comes down to it, and I'm sure the other folks on the panel can chime in on this, we have to go back to our internal key stakeholders and demonstrate the value. And sometimes it is based on the number of people that are attending the education, but we're trying to get them to understand that it goes beyond that.
Hey, so I'm going to call on Julia has a comment as well. Go ahead, Julia.
Thank you, Ted. Just really quick, 2 quick points. First is that from Takeda's perspective, we're actually trying to find out how to reach out to rural communities that are hard to reach and to those folks that really need the education. And the second point is, I'm not sure who the person is that specifically asked this question and what therapeutic area they're referring to that they need education in. But I'm more than happy if this person wants to reach out directly to me to connect him to folks that we've been working with to develop educational programs for folks that are really hard to reach. So please reach out to me directly, and I'm happy to help you in any way I can.
No, that's great. I think, as a follow-up, Beth, I'll say this to you, but anyone can also answer. I know that, one thing I know that, we've heard that when you folks are trying to present your case internally about the value of what you do, to a large, group of stakeholders in a meeting with a packed agenda, you often don't have a lot of time to get into the real details of what you do, and therefore a number that's large can be an easy way to communicate that you're sort of delivering value for the spend. Is that accurate, you think?
It is. It is. When we have limited time to submit outcomes to some of our key directors and vice presidents of the company, we do have to truncate what we are allowed to deliver, and they are always interested in the participants, the number of participants, the audience that we reached, and then also too, one of their main things they like to know is, what they plan to do with the education. Are they going to, make any kind of practice changes in their office, and how it's going to affect patients? The patient outcome is probably the most important thing is if it's going to benefit patients. But you know, you're correct. We do have limited time, and numbers are good. I mean, and outcomes, the higher level outcomes are much more appreciated.
Dale?
Yeah, and I totally agree with Beth there, and you know, just kind of, you know, given an example of a good situation that might be understandable to this person who asked the question is, I received a grant request. It was from a relatively larger association, but they were proposing level 7 population change outcomes. And, you know, I've only seen one of those in my career so far here, where they actually are saying that they're going to be able to accomplish this, but it was in one community. And these things, of course, are not cheap. They're very expensive as you go up the ladder of Moore's levels. And you know, so I couldn't support, as much as I wanted to do a level 7 outcome activity. You know, it was a QI initiative in minimizing STDs in a community. Affect that one little community, and I couldn't have supported that from you know, an internal perspective, just to impact that one little community, when really I could spend that money to do an educational activity that reaches a much larger population.
Yeah, I guess that would seem to definitely be a you know, you're trying to walk this fine line between a big, like being a mile wide and an inch deep, right, and an inch wide and a mile deep, and how can you find that happy medium between reach and meaning in that, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, well, Dale, since you were brave enough to take the to be willing to take the submitted question, I will let you go ahead and choose a number.
Okay, how about 13?
Oh, he goes against. He's brave enough to go with unlucky 13. Okay, this is a good one. Content-wise, a committee only reviews a title, learning objectives, and agenda, and the needs assessment is not reviewed, rarely reviewed, or sort of taken as a secondary consideration.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a myth that I've heard many times over the years. We, at least here at BMS, and I'm sure it's the same in many of the companies, we do look at learning objectives. We do look and see what the focus of the education is, and we do align that with our strategy, of course. But it's really very important for us to understand the educational needs that's coming through. When we're looking at these grant proposals, there's not an awful lot for us to actually be able to review, and you can't control the content. You can't, or sometimes don't even know the faculty, don't want to know the faculty in many instances. And yet, you know, you want to know that the organization that you're considering actually knows the space. And here at BMS, we also, that's what our medical team who sit on the review committee really hone in on and look for, to kind of assess, you know, where is the direction that this education is going to go. And sometimes it has been the educational needs assessment that has been the piece of the proposal that has actually supported the funding of the activity or not.
You know, that touches on a few related questions that maybe I'll pump up here. You know, Beth, in response to that, someone asked or just made the statement, committees don't care about lit reviews. And so with it's sort of a subset of what we just spoke about, you know, I guess, how would you respond to that as far as, like, you know, the quality of a needs assessment and a lit review's role in that versus maybe primary evidence or, you know, other kinds of data that could be included?
Now, it is very important. That is a myth. It is very important to have the correct literature reviews. Actually, my committee consists of all of physicians, and they look at the needs assessments very closely. And a lot of our grants have been denied based on the fact that the science was either inaccurate or that they did not have a fair, balanced literature review and reference review. If it's very heavy on just one particular class of drug or therapeutic area, and it's not very robust, then that is probably a good reason why some grants do get denied. But it is very important for the literature review.
Hey, I think Julia, are you there? Okay, I think we're trying to get Julia back. But a question, Dale, one of your comments touched on a different question, which I think is interesting because as a provider, I've sensed a change here. So it's a little bit of a two-part question. The statement was, the faculty listed in grants is a very important method that a committee uses to determine if the provider understands the topic they're proposing. And poor faculty choices can immediately torpedo a grant. And so I think what I'd love to see you guys comment on is, the methods by which, and you've already mentioned a little bit that, lit review and whatnot, the methods by which a committee evaluates whether or not the provider understands the therapeutic area, but secondarily trends in inclusion or not including faculty, because I've seen across the board more and more companies saying they don't want to see faculty listed, and I think we understand that that's because there might be a perception that a faculty is biased towards one supporter or another, but I do think that faculty is an important way for someone to judge whether you know what you're talking about in a therapeutic area. So I'm just interested in that two-parter of understanding whether a provider shows therapeutic expertise, and whether a faculty member, listed or unlisted, is a hot spot or something of real value. And I don't know, Dale, I'll call on you first.
Okay, so we don't have any rules here that we don't want to see it. We don't ask for it either. If it's in the grant, then that's fine with us. I think what the key point really is, when you're considering faculty, we know that these are just suggestions, that this is very often not the exact faculty that are going to be selected. It does give us an indication, though, of, do you know who the right people are? But I was talking to somebody on my team earlier today, and it's like, yeah, we always see the same old Dr. Smith on the grants all the time, and yeah, he happens to be a thought leader in the area, but there's no possible way that this one physician can do all of these grant proposals that are coming into us. So it does give us some information, but it's becoming, to me, less critical that we have that information. So I'm and my team, we don't really care if it's there or not. We don't look at it very closely.
How about you, Beth?
We do look at it. It doesn't make the determination whether a grant's going to be approved or denied, but if you have a program where part of the audience is going to be targeting NPs and PAs, you want to make sure that you also have appropriate faculty that knows how to reach those groups also and relate to those groups. And the flip side of that would be, if the listed faculty, there's some faculty that maybe have not done a great presentation in the past, or you've gone to multiple meetings and you're just really not happy with the performance of those faculty, then we kind of look at that sometimes too. Whereas too, if you have great faculty listed and it's all proposed, but then it's like, this company has the reach and the ability to get the really good speakers, and we're going to deliver a great program.
Yeah, there have been some instances where, when I was working in HIV, we had, I mean, it's a small group that is, that was presenting, and I knew all of the key thought leaders there. And yet here I am looking at grant proposals, and you know who the specialists are in there. And when you have a specialty topic and you know that there's only a few individuals that really could be the top level thought leaders for that, it does actually weigh in on your thought process, and does the organization really know who the key folks are?
Well said. Well said. Okay, let's keep it moving then. Beth, you're up.
Okay, number 6.
Number 6. Okay, this is an interesting one. The grant committee will reject a grant if the supporters' needs assessment that they've published within the RFP is used verbatim in the provider's proposal. So just to explain it more to the audience, obviously a lot of calls for grant applications that are put out by supporters have a needs assessment in them. And the idea here is that you as the provider will say, this needs assessment's great. I'm going to cut and paste it right in, and that's my needs assessment. And so is the question is, does that indicate or call for an immediate rejection?
Okay, I would say yes, it probably would, at least from my standpoint. I know that when we do an RFP and offer a needs assessment, it's 4 to 5 paragraphs long. It's not very robust, and it's kind of outlining an area that we're not receiving grants on. So we want to have a very much elaborated needs assessment done by the medical education company to support all of the different types of education that can go along with that. So now, yes, we would definitely reject it if they just copied and pasted and put it in there.
Dale, is there a different perspective in BMS, or can we assume it's the same?
No, it's very much the same. I mean, where, like Beth said, it gives an indication and some good background, but it's not what we would expect to see in a grant.
Gotcha. All right. So that means do your homework, providers. Let's get a little elbow grease going in there. Dale, we have, if you're willing, we have I think this is one, we've got another one from the audience now that it's your turn, but I will let you choose a number after this. So here's a question coming in from the audience. Would a grant be declined due to proposing too often to one provider, and therefore the supporter doesn't want to seem biased? So, sort of that idea around quotas, is there a point at which you can't really give any more funds to a certain provider because they've already gotten too much from you?
That's a very good question indeed. And it's a difficult question because you don't want to be seen as favoring one over another. But, when it comes down to it, there's a lot of considerations that come into play. And really, the number of times that I give monies to one group is not at the top of the list. It really is around the education. It is around the learning objectives. It's around the assessments with regards to the providers. Do they do what they say they can do? Many people know that me and my team here are now really focusing in on outcomes, and are the outcomes that were proposed to us, which we only have limited information to go on, are they actually meeting those outcomes, and are the outcomes reports for us important, or are they meeting what they said they were going to do? Those would come the key things, and I think it's very natural for us to make a grant decision based on those key elements. The learning objectives, and did they do what they said they were going to do, and is there a history there of doing that? It's not to say that we can't go with a group that's brand new. We have limited dollars, and we have to make good choices for the education that we support.
Hey, Julia, I think you're back with us, yes?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes. I don't know. Did you hear the, I wanted to give you a chance to respond to that if you heard the question. Were you able to hear that question? I can repeat it.
I didn't hear the question, but we can move on to the next one if most people responded.
Okay. Unless, Beth, did you have anything to add to Dale's?
Yeah, I do have just a
Go
little
for it.
bit. I do know that because I work with a primary care audience, there's so many different providers out there that can give us, you know, great grant applications. That's never an issue with me, but I know some of my colleagues who are working more in a specialty area where there is limited organizations that can provide good, you know, good programs. I think maybe it might be the case where they might provide a little bit more funding to a specific group, but I think for the most part, it's just like what Dale had said. It's all based on the application, the outcomes, the intent of the program, and if it fits the strategic needs of the company.
Well said. Okay, with Julia back, I want to give her a chance to pick a number. Go for it, Julia.
Okay, number 20.
Number 20. You know what? We pick another one. I think we kind of bled over into that with a separate question.
Number 1.
Number 1. Okay. This is around another one on RFPs, or call for grant applications. So most RFPs.
I think we covered that one.
Oh no, I think we have a. Okay, well, go ahead. Pick another number then.
Number 9, or anything that you think we haven't covered.
Okay. Okay, number 9. This one might be pretty quick, but we'll see. And this one really sounds like an angry provider. A high percentage. Okay, just whatever. Maybe, you know, whatever. A high percentage, say 90%, of submitted grants are eliminated through a screening or other vetting process and never make it to committee.
That would be a myth, and I'm not sure if I should add anything else, but that's a myth. We evaluate each grant, and each one makes it to the committee.
And I think that's probably I was going to say, I think probably the feeling behind this comes from the idea that we know that so many grants get submitted and that each one is so sort of term paper like, that the idea that a committee who's not working around the clock on it could be reading all these things, and you know that sort of seems like, I think that's probably where that's coming from. So you know, I don't know if Beth or Dale had a follow up on that they wanted to offer.
This is Beth. The only time probably that a grant gets an immediate rejection is if it's, you know, it's just off strategy completely. And we do offer a little bit of guidance on kind of some of the grants that we're looking for, and especially therapeutic areas. If it's not related to any therapeutic area available to choose and they've forced it in, then no, it gets rejected immediately. But that's not a typical situation.
You know, there are some actually good related questions to this that I'll pose right now. So one of it, you know, this is related, and it says, because of the number of grants submitted, the large number of grants submitted, I suspect that most grants are rejected or reviewed based on the contents of the information input into the online submission form, and rarely, if ever, are the full grants reviewed. You know, so there's obviously the information that you input in the online system, and I think all three of you have are using online systems, as are most commercial supporters. So maybe a comment on that process, like, you know, what you see that's formatted through the online system versus the full document that a provider might upload. Dale, you want to go first?
Sure. So when it comes to our cyber grants portal, we do ask for a fair bit of information in there. One of the key things I think that we look at first is, you know, what are the learning objectives, and really making an assessment as to how does that align with with our internal strategy. Okay. A lot of feedback.
Hold on, hold on. There. Okay. Sorry about that, Dale.
I hear you. You know,
right.
another related question to that is this one, which is trying to make grants more visually interesting and less text heavy is a waste of time because the only fields reviewed are text-based online form fields. The committees don't care about fancy graphics and/or images used to dress up grant requests. And I would also probably add to that, you know, and/or anyone submitting supplemental information, you know, whether it be videos that might demonstrate part of the grant or something like that. So how about you guys responding to that kind of extra information outside of the online form, the visual appeal of it? Does that make a difference? I don't know, Julia, do you want to tackle that one?
I think that extra information comes in handy when personally I can't understand like the design of the grant or the purpose, you know, overall request. But otherwise, depending on the request and if that information is necessary, like maybe examples of how the proposed format has been used in the past or something. It just depends, I guess.
Go ahead, Beth.
So we have a little bit different format. Everything is inputted online, but then it's downloaded into a PDF. So once it's in the PDF, we can see all the graphics and we can click on the videos and we can take full advantage of everything that's offered in it. One of the things that, since you know these are uploaded into the system, if someone's asked for a letter of the learning objectives, and they have one form that has learning objectives and agendas, sometimes some of the companies will upload the same things multiple times, which then makes this PDF now twice as long. So that is kind of irritating when they lumped multiple things together and uploaded several times. But no, we look at everything and have the ability to look at everything. And also we can look back and see what previous grants that they've submitted, what their outcomes were. So if a company submitted the same program the year before that, we can look at that and see if they actually came through with the number of attendees and the outcomes that they said they were going to get the previous year, which makes a determination on what we do sometimes for grants.
Yeah, so we look at all the grants too. We you know are able to have. I mean, we went a couple of years ago to a simplified online application only being required, but most all of the providers actually are submitting a proposal in PDF format as an attachment. And so the team will actually take a look at all of that information, read all of the grants, so that we have, you know, really a view of all of the activities that come in. Because really, when it comes down to it, we do get a lot of proposals, especially if it's an RFP process that we're running. And we want to actually approve and get the best program for the dollars that we're spending. So the team is always looking for those activities, and having that ancillary information that you mentioned, Ted, is very, very important for the team. We'll also times look at the capabilities of groups, and if it's a new group, we'll actually bring them into the office here at BMS to give us a capabilities presentation, so we get a better idea of what they're able to do and maybe even show us some of their activities.
No, that's great. I will say that we got a comment in from a supporter who I think, you know, Derek, this is probably someone who you can follow up with as a future panelist. Saying,
I don't know who it is, but sure. Maybe it was me.
So it's an anonymous submission. Well, there you go. It's they say many organizations have several level of review, so not every grant goes to committee. So there's a little bit of a, you know, someone saying I don't necessarily agree with what I'm hearing on the panel. That's fine. We embrace debate here on the panel. Thank you very much.
So Ted, for us, I mean, the first line of defense, I guess, is the IME specialist that we have here. So, you know, we do read each and every grant proposal that comes in, but the decision is made at the IME team level as to whether or not the proposals go on to committee. I think, as Beth said, you know, you get ones that come in and it's about toenail fungus, and we're just not in that space, you know. So, you know, there's no sense in bringing something like that to committee. And there's a number of activities, a number of proposals that really come in that are just so very weak. There's no way we would damage our reputation and bring that into the grant review committee. So I would agree with that.
Go ahead, Beth.
Yeah, there are dollar thresholds that we have that we're allowed to make independently from a committee decisions on grants, but we have a, you know, strategy aligned, and we have, it has to follow all the same critique that we would take to committee. So no, not every single grant that we have goes to committee either.
Got it. Okay. All right. You know, we have crossed out a lot of questions, so I may go to just reading some of the ones that we have left that represent some related areas, if that's okay. And if it's Beth, I'll start with you on this one, if that's all right.
Okay.
So here's one. It's about around the concept of pilot programs. So it says, proposing a small pilot project to measure a concept may create a compliance issue for the supporter to fund the second phase as the general idea is now known. You know, so a lot of times you hear the idea, can we pilot something? So this would be like you'd support the pilot, and then if the pilot went well, maybe you'd support phase 2. But is that a compliance issue because you kind of, phase 1 is telling you the direction?
Okay. It is not a compliance issue if it's a totally new grant and it's going to have different learning objectives, either based on what was learned from the pilot, and the program's completely independent of the previous program. Then no, it would not be a compliance issue to support something like that. It would be 2 separate programs. This may be the same topic but enhanced.
Gotcha. Okay, so it's sort of the mechanics of the, like, let's make sure we have a new submission. You know, Julia or Dale, the whole idea of pilots, is that something that you think is a good idea? Is it a tricky compliance issue where you guys are? I don't know, Dale, you want to go first?
I haven't really received any kind of request like this. That's you know, a pilot request where we would go additionally to fund it. I mean, from the sounds of the question, you were asking, is there a separate? Sounds like a robot.
The invasion of artificial intelligence.
Hold on 1 second.
The robots are coming.
Oh, that might be.
Robots are coming.
Hold on.
Julia away.
Okay, I muted Julia. I think she had some. Okay, go ahead, Dale.
So yeah, so the robot in me is coming out, and I totally lost the train of thought. What were we talking about?
We're talking about like the idea of you know, instead of someone like pilot programs. So instead of, say, coming out with a huge idea, you know, let's start with a small, like, could be a new concept, it could be you know, a large concept, but let's pilot it first with a phase 1. And then, you know, you might be open to, if phase 1 went well, you know, you might fund phase 2. But the question is, if you fund phase 1, have you already been given too much insight into the program to be able to compliantly review phase 2?
Okay, yeah, so I mean, I think I agree with what Beth was mentioning. I think, you know, generally speaking, if it's different content and it's a phase 2 of a particular activity, I don't think that's much of an issue. We will review those. Like some good examples, things that I think of is some of the e-textbooks and stuff that go out there, and they need to have content that's updated from a, you know, year-to-year basis. And so, you know, the vehicle, you know, the e-textbook, whichever one that's out there, but the content's new. And so, you know, you can, when you receive a grant proposal, even though you know the vehicle of the education, the modality, The content itself is going to be different. So I don't think that's an issue from our perspective.
Okay, very good. Julia, we got one from the audience I'd like to pose to you if you're up for it. When reviewing a proposal,
Ted, hang on a second. Julia is muted, and I cannot get her unmuted for some reason. Oh,
I think I should.
she's back. She's
there
back.
she is.
She's back. Never mind.
I'm telling you, she's under a bot attack. We heard the voices, and we all better just keep our human contact because these machines are going to be running it all very shortly. I'm telling you. All right. Julia, when reviewing a proposal, what's the importance of ensuring it lists the gaps of the specific learner audience? In our case, we're addressing the gaps and needs of nurse practitioners and often have to rely on the gaps of physicians in the literature because the data for nurses just isn't there.
Oh, that's interesting. So is the question,
I think the question is basically, I think the question is basically like if it's a nursing program and they're quoting to you literature that's based on doctors, is the committee going to say, well, you're not giving me evidence for nurses, so I can't get behind this program?
Well, to be honest with you, I'm not sure that I have run across this issue in the therapeutic area that I'm responsible for, which is IBD. So we definitely, when we review grants, look for the specific needs of the audience that we're trying to educate. So it is important for us to reach the right people with their education. I think that's probably the number one, one of the first kind of tactics we use to review a grant.
Yeah, I'm guessing that one place, maybe I'll put this to Dale and Beth to see if they've seen it. I bet one way that you might see this is that you have a needs assessment that is quoting, say, physician information, but then they're listing nurses in the audience, and you're not maybe seeing evidence supporting gap for nurses in the needs assessment. Is that a red flag?
I guess I could take a stab at it. I guess I have it easy because my area is diabetes. So I would expect references definitely like on guidelines and things that would apply to both physicians and nurses. I guess maybe I haven't come across that. I would expect it to be a robust needs assessment with literature review for both, not just maybe one or the other.
Yeah, for me, if there was discordant needs assessment like that, I would be concerned, and I would not want to probably support a program that's giving me the needs assessment for physicians, yet I'm, the target audience is nurse practitioners.
Okay. This is, and we're starting well. The crowd is really starting to flood these in as the deadline comes up. It's probably, I bet you guys get more grant submissions on the last day the RFP deadline is than a few days beforehand, right? I think this is a kindred example here.
And Ted, let me give you a 3-minute warning.
Okay.
Maybe 4-minute warning. Well, Scott will have to sweat it out a little extra. So go ahead.
Come on, we got to give the people what they want.
Give people what they want.
Anyway, all right, won't delay. Dale, to you. Or I'll say this because I know that Beth and Lily do this. So it says a few commercial supporters, and I'll add like Lily, will list the % of funding available for CME on their grant portal. Why don't all supporters follow this type of model so the provider doesn't waste time and money on these efforts? So Dale or Julia, I don't think that your spots do that. So is there a why or why not?
So we don't have percentages, but we do have areas on our website with the kind of like the red light, green light, graphic. So if it's green, we're accepting grants in that area, which means that funding exists. If it's red, then we're no longer accepting in that area. So yeah, that's on the bms.com under medical education.
Oh, I misspoke then. So you do it. How about you guys, Julia?
We don't do it, but I can definitely see the benefits of it. So it's definitely something to mull over. I guess maybe one of the reasons that we may not be doing it right now is, our budget and our strategy, although, we follow that and we set it at, in the beginning of every fiscal year, it's not set in stone. So that would be my response.
Okay, very good. All right, and we'll try to get this last one in, and we'll start with you, Beth. And this is from the audience. Do you have a preference on who the accredited provider of the activity is? Would a university be rated higher than an accredited medical education company or joint providership with an accredited MEC?
Okay. We see everything. MECs by themselves, accredited providers by themselves, and then joint. It probably really, it doesn't make a difference. It is definitely the quality of the program and how it aligns with our strategy. It's the quality of what they've submitted.
I would agree.
Julia, final word?
I would agree too.
Oh, look at that. We end with a quorum. All right. Well, listen, I want to really thank I thought the panel was awesome. You guys were great. I especially appreciate Julia hanging in, with the technical difficulties, and she stuck it out to the end, and we got a lot of great information from her. Thanks again to Derek and Scott for putting this all together. Thank you to the viewers for listening, and we hope to do it again soon, maybe in the spring.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks
you.
everyone. Let me give you a couple ending slides. Just remember to take our survey. If you can, survey. There's a little link underneath the live page. Click on it. We'd like to know how many people are actually watching and get your feedback. So if you could do that, that would be great. And just a reminder that in order to watch the next session, you're going to have to refresh your page, the live page that you're on. And our next session is our lunchtime session if you're on the East Coast. And it is our sponsored by Genentech, From Activation to Evolution, what CME can learn from the Trump campaign, Uber scandal, and Amazon. Ooh, very provocative. All right, thanks everyone. Thanks all of you. And we are going to close out.
Thank you. Bye.